Hello and welcome to American Friction, the only US politics podcast that feels like a big old hug for your ears. I'm your lead lobe lover, Jacob Jarvis.
I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry about this, but it says it in the script. And I'm your favourite lug lugger. No, lug snuggler. I'm your favourite lug snuggler, Chris Jones.
I am horrified.
And joining us today is someone who puts the yo in audio. It's Nikki McCann from Ramirez. Hey, Nikki.
I reject it all. No, absolutely.
I wonder who wrote the script for that then.
Oh, Chris did.
It wasn't
Lobe
me.
lover? Lobe lover.
Lug snubbler.
Yeah, look.
Lug snubbler.
Right, it's all going well. On this show, it's the economy, stupid. Trump is steering the United States towards a recession. What's going on, and do any of his excuses check out? Plus, we're going to round up some other stories you might have missed and answer your listener questions. But before that, Chris, it's that time of week. Let's get silly then. Give us a question.
Well, this is a less silly question, I think.
Okay.
A more just question.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Gavin Newsom, he started a new pod.
Yeah.
Gavin Newpod, I've been calling him in my brain.
Yeah. Cool.
So my question to both of you is, do you agree with politicians setting up podcasts? And if there was a politician that you would like to set up a podcast, who are they?
I don't agree with it because I want people to listen to our podcast.
Well, yeah, that's
so don't listen
quite.
to Gavin Newsom's podcast. Gavin, he listens. It's a saturated market, and I'd really rather not have other competitors. And I think he makes quite good money. Gavin Newsom.
On the pod?
I think he makes good money.
I think he makes good money
away
out of the
from
pod already.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So I think he doesn't need the pod, and he doesn't need to be snaffling up ad money, which should be coming to us.
Snaffling
and
up.
if he launches a Patreon, I'm going to California and causing some trouble. So yeah, I'm not huge on it. On ones that I would like to listen to, if it were current, there's barely any that I would like to listen to. But I would like to just see a legitimate frenemies podcast where they are just opposites. So, hear me out. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton podcast.
Jesus Christ.
And just get them to do a podcast.
It wouldn't be a terrible listen, I don't think.
Just
it would
see
go
how
on.
it goes.
It would certainly go on.
It really would.
It would take a while.
But just, I hate hearing these people. It's like, I've got someone I vaguely disagree with. But then historically, Genghis Khan, let's see what his podcast is like. And see what he's got to say. Just let's go back. Marcus Aurelius would have a really good podcast.
Okay.
Sort of the Stoic Emperor.
No one knows how he sounds, though. Some scientist historian nerd has probably figured it out, haven't they?
Yeah, there's always one of them.
Yeah. Nikki, what about you?
I think if you are an elected politician and you have time to do a podcast, you are not doing your job correctly.
Right.
Go do your fucking job. Your job is not to sit there and interview Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk. It's to fix the shit that needs to be fixed. I'm sorry. I can't stand this shit. This is why Gavin Newsom is never going to be president. He's way too thirsty for it. His focus is in the wrong place. But if I had to do a podcast with a politician, they can be dead, right?
Yeah,
well,
sure.
yeah, he's gone with someone 1,000 years old. So
cool. I would do Teddy Roosevelt. If I had to pick like an American politician, I would do Teddy Roosevelt. Like Mountain Man, who ended up being president. I think for like 20 minutes, he would be freaked out by the concept of a video camera and a microphone, and then he just wouldn't shut up. And I think that would be fantastic.
That would make a really good viral moment. Like, I surprised Teddy Roosevelt with modern technology. And you walk him into the room and just see how he handles it. Chris?
He'd probably try to shoot it, but...
That's so American.
Yeah.
That's how we solve our problems here.
Oh, we know.
Yeah.
We know. I would say that I think there could be a place for politicians and podcasts. I'm thinking like Opie and Wigston Borough Council do like a weekly update for their constituents, and people can choose whether they want to tune in or not. But someone who is a governor of a state,
I agree with that though. The practical element, I think, matters. Gavin Newsom feels like he's trying to raise his profile and have big conversations instead. Whereas if he was like, this is what's happening in California this week, that probably wouldn't annoy me so much.
Yeah. So I think there could be potential there. Voice went really high. That was good. And in terms of politicians, I know this is my own question, but I haven't thought of an answer for it. But I would go more realistic, actually, than you two.
Okay.
Imagine an Obama podcast.
Didn't he have one?
Yeah. I think
he's already got one.
I think he did have one. I think it was so realistic. I think it might have happened. Yeah.
Oh, he had that like series with Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, what?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
No.
If you're going to make a podcast with the boss, you make it with the boss.
And Michelle Obama has a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for you, Chris, Mayor Peter Soulsby from Leicester, you and him.
No, say his name properly, though.
Soulsby.
Soulsby. I've got his phone number.
All right.
Shouldn't say that on the pod, should I?
Well, Gavin, if you're listening, stop making the podcast.
Gavin, if you're listening, shut the fuck up.
Shall we pod?
Yeah.
Let's pod. You're listening to American Friction.
Before we start, we love making the show. We love that you love listening to it too. It's lovely, but we'd love it if you could find it in your lovely hearts to support us on Patreon.
That was lovely, John.
Thank you,
And
man.
for just £3 a month, you'll get the show ad-free, and other tiers get you access to bonus content and merch. And if you sign up for £5 a month or more, we have a Patreon chat community where you can ask questions to us and each other directly so that we can talk through the madness going on in US politics all together, which would be lovely. Again. And we'll give you a peek behind the scenes when it comes to what we're thinking of discussing on the show each week too. So you can have all of your queries answered on the show.
Yeah, so what are you waiting for? Follow the link in the show notes or go to patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. That's patreon.com/American Friction to sign up.
Lovely.
Nikki, they're calling it the Trump session over here. Just how bad does America's economy look right now?
I mean, there's a lot of glaring red signs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like in a cartoon where the character is like speeding down a highway. It's like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner.
Okay.
And it says like cliff in 500 meters. And there's all these like flashing signs that are like, stop, turn around, death in 400 meters. I think that's what it feels like right now. We're seeing over the past like 2 weeks, Trump has erased the post-election bump he got in the stock markets. We're seeing just like concerning signs that like job growth has kind of slowed and some indicators that were steadily trending upward under like the last couple months of the Biden presidency have now leveled out. They're not declining yet, but they're not going up. Every reputable economist that I have seen get in TV and talk about it has either said this is going to be really bad, or if they're a Republican has been like, oh, well, there's going to be a transitional period where, you know, it's going to be a little bit of pain for long-term game. It's never a little bit of pain when the economy crashes, when there's a recession. A little bit of pain is people losing their jobs, their homes, their livelihood, their healthcare, their ability to like function within society because they cannot make ends meet. So it also is a lot of rich people being like, stop complaining.
Yeah.
Which I don't think from the government is an acceptable answer to the question, hey, it looks like you're about to crash the economy. Why would we do that? So the indicators are there. They're not great. And I'll let Chris speak to the polling data because I think we have some of that teed up.
Yeah. So as well on that though, Nikki, just briefly touching back on what you're saying about just how quickly things could go wrong for people.
Yeah.
Is that also maybe why Trump isn't taking it as seriously as he should, or Musk not taking it so seriously, is because they'll say, oh, it's going to be a blip. And they don't realize that so many people, a blip can just wipe them out and then leave them in, a real pit sort of thing to get into the metaphor.
They're poised to make a ton of money. These are people that, regardless of how the economy does, elected officials and people like Elon Musk, they have access, they say that rich people, most of their money is in investments and that kind of thing. We see it kind of like every recession. Recessions happen. Things like the COVID-19 pandemic happen. Somehow politicians and corporate bigwigs are always the ones that escape the drama. Yeah, corporations, some of them go under, but rich people, they tend to stay rich. Lawmakers still tend to make money, even if there's a recession. Like, they have access to these theoretically classified briefings about things that could affect the stock market. So that's part of it. I also think one of the kind of scary signals we're seeing, and I actually wrote about it today, was that you're having executives at major American companies calling the White House and begging them to stop acting insane. Because one of the big things that I think is scaring a lot of these markets is how erratic Trump's decision-making on the tariff policy is. It's one day, we're instituting the tariffs tomorrow. Okay, now it's in a month. Oh, but these 3 specific companies, they get a reprieve. Actually, no, I'm not doing it today. I'm doing it on April 2nd. On Thursday, a couple hours before we recorded this episode, he said he's going to implement a 200% tariff on wine and alcohol coming from the European Union. And it sounds really silly, and it is really silly because, like, if you're looking for a way to piss people who are already angry at you and your handling of the economy to piss them off even more, tell them they have to pay more for alcohol. That'll really do it. But also, it's the fact that he sees all these signs that the stock market is going down, that people are really nervous, investors are nervous, companies are like, ooh, can we trust the United States right now? Are they too volatile to be a good investment? And instead of pulling back on the reins and saying, okay, we're going to take a beat, we're going to outline this policy, we're going to recalibrate our messaging strategy, he's waking up at 8 a.m., getting on Truth Social and screaming into the void that he's going to make imported alcohol, 200% more expensive.
With his excuses that he's making around this, I know you wrote a piece on this, Nikki. Just how ridiculous are they? Do any of them stand up? Is he just kind of screaming Biden, basically?
Part of it is he's screaming Biden. The other, I think, major excuse is what I just touched on, this idea that, oh, well, it was really bad, and in order to fix it, we have to do all these things, and it's going to suck for a little bit, but then it's going to get better. I think one of the sillier ones, he at one point said that, China thinks of its economy 100 years in advance, and the United States only focuses on quarters, and we have to think 100 years in advance. It's like, I don't think China in this day and age would intentionally sink its trade system, like start implementing 17th century mercantilistic policies just to get in a dick measuring contest with their regional allies, because that's what it is right now. It's a dick measuring contest between like Canada, the US, and Mexico. And the US doesn't have to do that. Like, I love Mexico. I love Canada. But if you're saying, oh, well, we have to think 100 years in advance, I'm not going to live 100 more years. I don't.
You might.
You might do.
My brother, not the way I've been living. Not the way I've been living.
Fair.
Do you know what my cortisol levels are like? I'm going to die of a heart attack at 60. Okay.
Chris, I don't want to just besmirch you as not an expert here, because you are. So I want to know what you think on everything as well. But what have the experts been saying?
Pretty much exactly what Nikki's just said there, that the flip-flopping on tariffs, I like that word, flip-flopping. 2 words or 1 word?
Whoa, flip-flop.
One word.
Let's make it 1 or 2 with a dash. Which then is that 1? Who knows?
Who knows? Who cares?
Wait. What do you guys call like beach shoes?
Flip-flops.
Okay, good. There we go. Okay, excellent.
Or flippy floppies.
Yeah.
Anyway,
definitely not thongs. I don't like
stop that. That's terrible. Anyway, the tariff situation is making it really the situation, the economy really volatile. No one really knows what's going to happen, so no one really wants to commit to putting their money.
Cowards.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You could say that, or you could just say that you would do the same.
Perhaps
you would be you'd be hesitant I would say. But Kathleen Brooks of the trading platform XTB, she told The Guardian that she believes that Trump is putting political goals ahead of the economy. And I think we could probably all agree that's probably quite an obvious thing to say. Looking at example of a tracker of GDP in the US, so the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta marks GDP at minus 2.4% growth as of March 6th, but it was at 2.9% growth at the end of January. And essentially under Biden, GDP never went lower than 1% in all 4 quarters of 2024. But when it comes to inflation, it stayed relatively similar to that of Biden's administration. It's actually fallen from 3% in January to 2.8%, which could be slightly positive for Trump's administration. And then on another expert, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell hasn't really said too much apart from we need to see how Trump's economic policies impact GDP, impact inflation. So in terms of rates, no decision is really being made right now. But I think, is it the 17th of March when they next meet?
I believe
the Federal
so.
Reserve. So we'll find out more then in terms of how the Federal Reserve is feeling.
With the stock market seems to be something that everyone is, super caught up in, and Trump really wants to focus on it. He has to go at Biden so much. Can we compare a little bit of how the stock market performed under Biden and how it's performing under Trump?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we should say that presidents don't control or really have much direct impact on stock markets.
Yeah. And the stock market isn't a great indicator of the health of an economy as a whole. We should also say that.
Exactly. And also, Trump doesn't really seem to understand that either, because it was a famous attack line at the start of Biden's term that Trump said that Biden would crash the stock markets.
Also, Trump would brag his entire first presidency that the stock market had never been higher, that he was an economic genius because the stock market was breaking records.
Yeah. So if you look at the stock market, essentially, it doesn't paint a terrible picture of Trump during his first term. The Dow in Trump's first term saw 56% return compared to Biden's 40%, which is according to Bespoke Investment Group. But most recently, if we look at the first 50 days of both Biden and now Trump's second term, NASDAQ, for example, which is a key indicator, which makes, I think it's about 3,000 companies that make it up. Biden's term saw an overall dip of just under 1%, but Trump's first month saw a bigger decline of about 11%. Now, both had different, there were different economic situations that impacted the stock market. And as we say, presidents don't control the stock market, but it has been used as attack lines in the past by both parties, Republican and Democratic. So it wouldn't surprise me if it is also used as attack lines in the future as well.
The stock markets are a good indicator of investor confidence. That's really what I try to treat it as. And the thing to understand there is that investor confidence and rich people's willingness to pour money into a country, a society, a marketplace, an industry, that does affect things like GDP, job growth, hiring, all those kinds of things. And I think one of the things that we should remember when we're talking about the excuses that Trump is making for these tariff policies is he keeps insisting that what this will do is force manufacturers to come back into the United States, steel, lumber, oil, that kind of thing. Problems are twofold there. One, it's not like these factories, these manufacturing plants can just pop up overnight. It's not like there's a switch where international corporations can just, wave a little wand and a new BP oil rig appears overnight. It takes years. And the other thing is, okay, well, theoretically, if you slash the corporate tax rate and you make it not necessarily cheaper, but you place more taxes on imported goods in order to encourage domestic production, but the government of that country is seen as unstable, erratic, volatile, led by a guy who can change his mind at any given moment. That does not inspire investor confidence. So it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm making it more attractive to produce goods in the United States, you have to have a government that looks like it can follow through on those policies.
I also wonder whether, and this is just a question that I'm throwing out there, I have no expertise on this at all, but I wonder if Elon Musk being so heavily involved within Trump's administration and also being, let's face it, a key leader in the tech industry, and then what we saw with DeepSeek AI, for example, completely undermining the American tech sector, which wants to be a world leader, whether that also may have had an impact on investors, especially when it comes to the people that they want to put their trust in developing tech across the US and make it a world leader, whether because of what happened with DeepSeek AI, whether investors saw that and just thought, well, what the fuck?
Well, yeah. And it's not just that. Tesla stock took a massive dip over the last week. And that's why we saw Donald Trump turn the White House into a used car lot.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a new car lot. I hope he at least bought a new car, but that we'll get into that later. I think it also doesn't inspire a lot of confidence from companies, investors, when you have someone like Elon Musk, who is a billionaire, who is, as we said last week, just a guy who doesn't really hold elected office, who has all these conflicts of interest. The things that he's doing, for example, at the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, where like in 2023, the government had awarded this $2 billion contract to Verizon, the telecommunications company, to upgrade a bunch of the FAA systems. This contract was in the works. The system hasn't been launched yet, but Verizon was already developing it. Elon Musk swoops in, starts talking shit about Verizon on Twitter, and now we have reporting saying that he has installed Doge people in the FAA and SpaceX people in the FAA and is pushing them to find either a way to cancel the Verizon contract and transfer it to SpaceX so they can use the Starlink satellites to do the same thing, or to cut enough funds or cut enough programs at the FAA that they can find the money to pay out a similar contract to SpaceX.
Ugh.
What this says to investors is, how do I know that if I come into your country and I put in several $1 billion or I make a deal with the US government to do XYZ, that some fuck-ass billionaire isn't going to swoop in 8 months after I've spent all this money and just take it away from me, and you're going to do nothing about it. That also does not inspire investor confidence. And the long-term consequences of that is Trump, is going to theoretically be here in office for 4 years. Investors looking down the line, it isn't just, this moment. If they feel like Trump is going to stay this volatile and things are going to be this back and forth for the next 4 years, they might choose to move production just out of the United States. It could produce entirely the opposite effect of what's intended here. So, we're in for a fun one.
Chris, everyone is pretty stressed out about this across America, aren't they? What's the polling telling us, poll man?
Yeah, well, don't call me poll man.
Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Go on, number dude.
The number dude. So according to a new poll from Ipsos of over 1,000 Americans, more people feel that their personal economic situation is worse off than before. So if we look at the extremes of this, in November, 19% said they felt very comfortable and 10% very uncomfortable. But at the end of January, 9% felt very comfortable and 15% very uncomfortable. So that switched around, Jarv.
You should make a podcast called The Northern Pole. And you talk about
the
statistics.
Northern Pole.
Yeah.
You're really happy with that, aren't you?
I think that's quite good.
I know you do.
Just like
I can see it by the smile on your
just
face.
on what's going on up north. I'm allowed to say that because I'm from up north. I just don't sound like it.
But also, there are people who are actually northern who would look at me and say that I'm not northern.
Yeah, people would argue I'm not completely northern. Lincoln's very borderline.
It's more northern than Leicester, though, isn't it?
Yeah, because Hull, you are northern. But Lincoln, you kind of...
Northish.
But it's like half an hour away.
Skeggy in Lincoln.
Skeggy's in Lincolnshire. Yeah, it's quite nearby.
So it's in Lincoln.
No,
I know that because it's a city.
Yeah, Lincoln's a city.
I was shortening it.
Lincolnshire's
Anyway.
yeah, nice.
You Brits and your funny names.
It's actually called Skegness.
Skegness. Yeah, it's good. It's good fun.
No, it's great. Sponsor us, Skegness.
I think it's got 4 Weatherspoons in about 5 minutes of each other, and I rate any city that does that.
Listeners, when I was in London last year, they took me to a Weatherspoons, and I've never experienced anything like that.
Man, you went to a posh Weatherspoons. It has an exec suite, like a first
did
floor.
have
Comfy chairs.
Yeah,
Comfy
the
chairs.
exec suite. I love spoons.
No.
I do. I can't help it. I'm sorry. I know
that's
maybe he's not a nice guy and
He's-
whatever.
What was the other place that was near the office? The Dick and Balls?
The famous cock.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, the schlong and balls and dick.
Remember
that's good.
getting out of the underground and being like, this is the most unserious nation I've ever
Yeah.
Oh
been in.
god.
The famous cock.
Yeah, the famous cock. Oh, Nick, you just come down. There's just so many synonyms for penis on every single shop. Like, where am I? Nick. So Musk is
crying.
obviously.
Oh, whistle laughing.
Oh gosh, I'm
Mariah Carey next to me there.
Pure Muttley there. Let's touch back in on Musk and how worried he is about Tesla. So Tesla's fucked, basically, isn't it? What's going on there? And also, like, how insane is this weird crackdown on Tesla protesters we're seeing? I mean, Trump has really gone full. Leave Elon alone.
Leave Elon alone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, what the hell?
as we mentioned, oh my God, I'm literally crying. Tesla's on the struggle bus, and I sound sad about that, but I'm really not. It's just because I teared up a bit in that last segment. Tesla stock really took a nosedive.
Mhm.
All of the gains, much like the economy in general, all of the gains they'd made through like Elon's involvement in Trump's campaign and the election, those have been wiped out. And there's, it's a major conflict of interest that Elon Musk continues to be the head of all these companies, the big man in charge, while at the same time doing all this shit within the federal government. And we're hearing and seeing a lot of reporting indicating that executives, board members, people within Musk companies are growing really frustrated by the fact that he's spending so much time on the government and not actually managing his companies. So that's part of why there's like the general squeamishness about the state of the economy right now, but with Tesla specifically and SpaceX and Musk companies, there's a lot of anxiety that Musk is just like no longer in a position to properly run the company. And I don't know if Simon can pull up the clip here of his interview with Larry Kudlow this week.
You giving up your other stuff? I mean, how are you running your other businesses?
With great difficulty. Yeah, I mean...
But there's no turning back, you're saying?
I'm just here trying to make government more efficient.
If I'm, a major investor in Tesla, if I am an employee at Tesla, I'm seeing that and I'm thinking, oh, I need to get the fuck out of here. Because I think, and we talked about it on a previous episode, Elon right now is burning a ton of bridges. He either needs to find a way to make himself like completely self-sustainable without the aid of, subsidies from the federal government, federal contracts, because if he at any point pisses off the Trump administration, or once the Trump administration ends and he encounters a president, a new government, whether it be Democrat or Republican, who's not interested in putting up with his shit, well, he's basically cut off one of the biggest sources of funding and one of the biggest like profit cushions that is provided to American tech companies. So much of the EV industry, like the EV industry, Tesla specifically, would not be what it is today if it didn't have years of government subsidies backing their production, backing their sales. And it's why we're seeing Elon right now try and cash in on things like the Verizon contract, why he wants to move up the federal contract he has to decommission the space station, because I think I've said it, he also knows that he's burning bridges and he needs to like milk the government for what he can now, because he's not going to be able to do so down the line. And I also think there is a slight chance he might be hit with like a board coup within at least one of his companies, where people say, you are clearly doing too much. You cannot manage this. It's not going the way we need it to. So we're going to pick someone else. I wouldn't bank on it. I wouldn't bet money on it yet, but I think it's a possibility, because there was, when he bought Twitter and things were really volatile, there was some reporting about how he's leveraged a ton of Tesla stock and a ton of like Tesla cash that is under his control, basically as collateral for loans that he used to buy Twitter and loans that he's used to do other things. And if Tesla's stock price falls below a certain amount, I think it's somewhere around like $200, it might be less, he can get margin called, which is basically a banker, his lenders can seize a bunch of that money that's tied up in stocks to make sure they get paid back what they're owed. And with the way Tesla stock is doing right now, I think the people within his company are getting really nervous.
Chris, what did you make of the scenes at the White House? It was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it?
It was ridiculous. I still don't understand why it happened.
No.
Why does Trump care?
It was to juice the stock. That's literally, it was a PR stunt because Elon was crying about losing theoretical money.
That's his juicy boy. You want to juice it up for
Who
him.
gives a shit? Just cut ties with him at this point. Anyone else would. I don't understand what Musk has got on him. Basically, he stood at the front of the White House cosplaying a second-hand car salesman with weird Teslas, but I think they look weird. I don't know what anyone else thinks. The Cybertruck, what the fuck is that?
No, Chris. It's not Tesla. It's Tesla.
Oh, fucking
Tesla.
I love Tesla.
But it was...
Everything's computer.
It was really weird. He said anyone boycotting or protesting against Tesla, whatever the fuck you want to call it, are domestic terrorists.
Oh.
And then also said something like those who demonstrate against them will face hell.
Gosh.
He said the word hell. He said they'll be caught and they'll face hell. It's just like, you're the president of the United States, not... Well, he might be an investor in Tesla. I don't know. He probably is.
I do know that Don Jr.'s investment company bought a bunch of, or invested a bunch in SpaceX. And I also think Tesla, but it was like $50 million across Elon's companies.
I just don't get it. Obviously I get it, but I don't get it.
I've got an idea for Elon. If you're listening.
Is he listening?
He is.
Right.
I'm sure. Probably with Gavin. He's probably on Gavin's next podcast.
Gavin Newpod.
Yeah, Gavin Newpod. Yeah, they're having a chat. He should start making, them little child cars, the little electric ones that I always thought were really sick.
Oh, not the ones that you run around with like that.
like the good ones that you'd always
They
see
are
it.
good.
You'd see at Toys R Us and your parents wouldn't let you get
Toys R Us.
one. Yeah,
That's
Toys
gone
R Us,
now, isn't it?
R.I.P. But and your parents just would never let you have one.
Yeah.
But Elon should start making really good Tesla ones of them, and he'll have a self-sustaining economy if he just buys them for his own children. And just does that over and over.
Right.
And then he'd be sweet, because he's making a fucking big customer base there.
I'm sorry. The thing was just like, we haven't talked enough about everything's computer.
What is everything's computer?
I hate him. I hate that he's so fucking funny. So Trump is like looking at all the different Teslas, the Tesla trucks, the Tesla. He gets into the Model, one of the Model X or the Model Y, the red one that was parked there. And he goes, "Oh, it's so different. Everything's computer."
Did you see him this week when he pointed at JD Vance's socks and he was just like, "What's the deal with the socks?" Just in the middle of the Oval Office. And you're like, yeah, he can be funny. He does just love rinsing people, and you've got to, when it's people I don't like,
I
fair play
hate
to
it.
him.
I hate it so much.
dream cars, people. That's my final question. Not Teslas, obviously. No one wants to buy a Tesla anymore. What would be your dream? You got to get really weird with it though as well. Like, don't just go with a car that you could just buy if you were rich. Get strange with it. So, who wants to go first? Nikki.
My dream car has always been a Volkswagen Combi. Like, that's always.
I don't know what that is. What is
really
that? Like a camper?
Just
the camper vans?
Yeah, like, you know the ones that, like,
the proper hippie camper vans.
Yeah, the one that was, like, blue. And
the proper old one.
Yeah, the proper old, not the new electric one.
Not the new electric proper old.
Proper old. Yeah.
Proper old.
She's actually turning English
We're turning Nikki Northern. It's happening.
Oh, ain't it?
Oh, yeah, lovely. I just like a little Volkswagen camper and I'd go up to Peak District.
And it's not even because I like camping. It's just, I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I like, I would have a modern VW camper just because I don't like the hassle of old cars. I'd get away from it. Chris, what about you?
Bumblebee.
What's Bumblebee?
Transformer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who doesn't want Bumblebee? Frankly, I'm shocked neither of you have said Bumblebee. It's sick.
I don't think I've ever watched Transformers.
Isn't it a Camaro? Isn't it just a Camaro? Like a yellow Camaro?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I thought it was a Chevrolet.
Yeah, it was a 2010 Chevy Camaro, I think. Something like that.
But he's more than that. He's Bumblebee.
He's Bumblebee, okay.
That was one of the sickest things when I went to Universal Studios in Orlando. The, like, fucking robot suits they have of the Transformers and the Decepticons. Those things are fucking sick.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Autobots are go. Is that what they say?
Autobots roll out?
Oh, yeah.
My dream car that I think I would like
the Thunderbirds
is so my actual. If money was no object car, I'd just buy the electric G-Wagon. It's really cool. Other cars are available. We're not advertising them. Also, if you're a listener and you can afford one of those, get a really expensive Patreon subscription right now. Patreon.com/American Friction. But what I would actually really like is I'd like to get my first car, which was a little Citroen C2, but it was the sporty version. It was really quick. Really fast. It was so loud in there that I had to have the volume on the CD player. I had CDs back then. I'm old. Really loud to make it bearable. But I would like to go buy my one, but then take it to the dudes in Pimp My Ride and get the outside to be the same as the car. So I look like low-key, because I'd want to be like a low-key rich guy, but the inside is sick. And they just give it like better stuff. But do it drive the same? I just liked parking it. I liked driving it. It was fun. It was just really loud and old. So yeah, I just want the shell. So people are like, oh, Jacob, he's just got a normal dude car. And then you get in and I'm like, you think it's a normal dude car?
Yeah, but
watch this.
Yeah, but can it transform into a sick mechanical soldier? No, it fucking can't.
But that
shut up.
That could
None
turn
of this
on
matters because I can't drive.
Neither can I.
Chris, so, yeah, I'm the only one whose opinion matters here right
I had
now.
my test cancelled twice by COVID, so leave me alone, all right? Wasn't my fault.
I
Fourth
passed
time
my
lucky for
test
me.
because the guy felt sorry for me.
Nice. So you can drive?
So you can drive?
Legally, yes.
Yeah.
Practically, no.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I legally can't, but practically can.
Oh, nice. Well, listeners,
What's your favourite car?
let us know who you'd rather get in a car with, Chris or Nikki. Both sound like bad options. I'll give you a lift, though. Now on to the roundup section of the show where we're going to cover a few stories that you might have missed this week. So, Nikki, one thing that is confusing me a little bit is this story around the campus protester who's been arrested and faces deportation. Who are they? And on the surface level, what have they been arrested for?
So, in the spring of last year, there were major protests throughout the United States in support of Gaza and Palestinians during the war between Israel and Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a ton of pushback, particularly from conservatives and the right against these protests. They were, in many cases, student protesters were falsely accused of being like pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism. And this has been a pattern throughout the history of this conflict, supporters of the state of Israel, of the government of Israel, have often conflated pro-Palestinian advocacy with being pro-terrorist.
Yeah.
So what happened in this past week was that one of the protesters at Columbia University, and Columbia, if people recall, was sort of the nexus of these university protests. It was like the first major encampment, and from Columbia University, these pro-Gaza protests started spreading throughout the country. One of the organizers of the Columbia University encampment, Mahmoud Khalil, he was arrested on Saturday at his home. He is a green card holder, so a legal resident of the United States. His wife was 8 months pregnant. They come home around like 8 p.m. And according to what his wife has told various news publications, some agents from the Department of Homeland Security who were dressed like civilians kind of followed them into their building when they opened the door, asked Khalil his name, and when he confirmed who he was, basically said, like, you're under arrest, you're coming with us. Your student visa has been revoked. When he and his wife attempted to inform the agents that he was not a visa holder, he was a legal permanent resident, they were like, oh yeah, that's also being revoked, you're coming with us. And he kind of got disappeared for like a little more than a day. It turned out that he had been transported more than 1,000 miles away to Louisiana and was being held in an ICE detention center in Louisiana. And the U.S. government, the Trump administration, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have essentially accused Khalil of participating in Hamas-aligned activities.
Yeah.
They have provided no proof that Khalil was an outright supporter of Hamas, provided any sort of material support to Hamas, like money or resources, because that is a crime in the United States. The government has not charged him with a crime. They are essentially admitting pretty openly that the reason they arrested him was because they did not like what he was saying about Israel and his role in the campus protest. It is very cut and dry a violation of the First Amendment. And the justification that the Trump administration is using is that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has the power to revoke a green card or a visa or any sort of like temporary immigration document of a person if he feels that they are a threat to like foreign policy, if they're destabilizing foreign policy. I spoke to a couple different experts on civil rights law and immigration law who all essentially told me that that is not what that law was intended to do. This is a very rarely used law that typically is only implemented against like known foreign entities with ties to governments or like hostile organizations that are openly hostile to the United States. And whenever this act is invoked, it's like a clause under the like Nationality and Immigration Act. The Secretary of State has to go to Congress and certify to Congress that the person whose immigration status they revoked was a threat to national security. What the Trump government is doing here is basically testing if they can get away with saying to any person who isn't a U.S. citizen, I don't like what you're saying, I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to kick you out of the country. And there is no distinction in the Constitution in like regarding the First Amendment between citizens and non-citizens. If you are legally in the United States, even if you're there illegally in some cases, but if you're there legally, if you have a visa, a green card, if you're a citizen, you enjoy First Amendment protections. Your rights are not necessarily dependent on your immigration status. The right to free speech is definitely not dependent on your immigration status. So it's a horrifying breach of authority, excess of authority, in which the United States is basically saying that anyone who disagrees publicly with what Israel is doing to Palestinians in Gaza can theoretically have their citizenship or their residency revoked and be accused of terrorism, of like being a terrorist sympathizer. It's insane.
How are Trump allies kind of squaring this? That I thought the whole thing about the right-wingers was, yeah, but you can say, anyone can say what they want. I just don't, like, how are they talking around this? Because they haven't said what he said, but it's like, even if he were to have said something that, people might not like, I thought their whole shit was sort of facts, not feelings. People say what they want. It's like, yeah, how is that playing out?
Well, it also kind of depends because, like you said, the United States government has not produced any evidence that Khalil was like openly a Hamas supporter, openly a Hamas like sympathizer. But even if he was, which again, there is no evidence that he is, that is protected speech. It is that is the same reason that neo-Nazis can march in Charlottesville and say Jews will not replace us, and they weren't arrested. It's because that is protected speech. I don't like the speech. We don't, there's plenty of stuff you can disagree with, but the Supreme Court has reaffirmed time and time again that even if it's hateful, even if it's vile, even if it's disgusting to you, it is protected speech. So on the right now, you have sort of a mix of reactions. The primary one is, Democrats are defending a terrorist sympathizer. That Democrats are defending this guy who hates Israel. And this is just more evidence that Democrats support anti-Semitism. And again, this entire discussion, there's a reason they went after Khalil and not a member of Jewish Voices for Peace, which is a very prominent organization in the United States that has organized a ton of pro-Palestinian protests over the past years, because they're claiming that this is all under the guise of, protecting Jews from anti-Semitism. It's not. It's protecting the state of Israel from criticism and attempting to conflate criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism, which are two very different things. The second reaction is conservatives who are angry that Khalil was picked because they say, there's no evidence here that exactly what you're saying, like we're supposed to be the free speech party. There's no evidence here that this guy committed a crime. And in their view, there are plenty of pro-Palestinian protesters who committed vandalism, who broke into buildings, who did XYZ. So you have people like Candace Owens being like, it was a mistake to go after this guy because he looks sympathetic. And there were plenty of other people with actual criminal records who you could have deported. And then there's a very small subset of other conservatives, and it varies widely because some of them are extremists who are like, hey, actually, if we start doing this, then, other people, definitely not me, could be targeted because of their speech. Or like your Glenn Greenwalds, who like to posture as free speech advocates when it's convenient for them. And in this instance, it is convenient for them, who are saying that this is just like antithetical to principles of free speech. But the loudest voices right now on the right are the people saying that anyone criticizing this action by the Trump administration is essentially an anti-Semitic Hamas sympathizer.
Chris, any reactions that have particularly stood out to you on this one?
Not massively, to be honest. I haven't seen a whole lot from the Democratic Party. I'm pretty sure AOC hasn't said anything yet, which I was quite surprised about. She may have said something by the time this comes out, but I don't think I've seen anything. But one thing that I did see that we haven't mentioned yet was what Trump put on Truth Social about this, which I've got it here. He said, many are not students, they are paid agitators. We will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again. If you support terrorism, including the slaughtering of innocent men, women, and children, your presence is contrary to our national and foreign policy interests, and you are not welcome here. We expect every one of America's colleges and universities to comply. And then I'm pretty sure he also either tweeted or put on Truth Social, Shalom Khalil.
That was the White House. Yeah.
There's been merch being sold for that.
Crazy.
Also, AOC has called for him to be released. It was like
okay. So AOC has said something now.
But you are right. A couple days ago, some Democrats signed a letter calling for his release and an explanation for the Trump administration, and only 14 Democrats signed it.
Exactly. there's been a muted response, I would say, which I think is a big problem. Also, just on this as well, Khalil was a former program manager at the Syria office in the British embassy in Beirut.
Yeah.
And there have been some people who have come out and talked about his character. One of those is former British diplomat Andrew Waller, who was a policy advisor at the Syria office. And he told the Middle Eastern Eye that the US government's depiction of Khalil was false and defamatory. And he said it's outright defamation what Trump has done. Mahmoud is an extremely kind and conscientious person and was loved by his colleagues at the Syria office. Now, we have no way of really quantifying that, but I would not hesitate to say that he's probably not lying in that statement there. And I just come back to it, that the Shalom Khalil it's outrageous, is it not?
Yeah.
My thought being though was even if, say, from that statement, this person has had a fundamental, had a massive shift in character and whatever
Which can
else,
happen. It can happen. Yeah.
And has said, and even if there's something really, really awful, you can't just go and make people disappear off the street for fuck all. And that's the thing. It's just, you might want to see it happen to people you don't like. But when you actually think about it, you think, well, that you can't have these sort of precedents come into force.
And it's exactly as Nikki says, there's no evidence, really.
Yeah. His deportation has actually been blocked. I believe there is a scheduled hearing this week to see what the Trump administration has, what justification they're using. But this is a real major test of free speech protections in the United States. And if Khalil ends up getting deported, that is a horrendous precedent for any protester in the United States. Forget just people who are non-citizens. This lays the groundwork for the government to start targeting anyone whose criticism they don't like.
Yep. Right, let's move on to some slightly lighter things towards the end, and we've got some listener questions to get through. We'll try get a couple in here, but one thing I just wanted to ask you about very quickly, Nikki, and you could probably sum this story up quite quick. The plane that bombed Hiroshima, I see, has been declared as woke.
Oh yeah, the Enola Gay, the gay airplane. Yeah. So.
I don't know the story. I have no idea what's happening now.
Okay, so as we've discussed on the pod, there is a major effort by the Trump administration to purge all federal administrations, most major government departments, of any content that is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion related. So a couple weeks ago, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, told the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, that they needed to go through all the Pentagon's and the Army, the military, the Navy, all the Defense Department's digital content and social media and purge any content related to DEI. Fast forward a couple weeks, this process is underway. The Associated Press gets hold of a database with 25,000 images that have been flagged for removal by the Department of Defense because they're related, allegedly, to woke DEI policies. And it seems that what was done here is that whoever was doing this was just typing quote unquote woke words into the search bar, like women, gay. So in this database, there were images of the Enola Gay, which is a Boeing super bomber that was used to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. It's an airplane. And the name Enola Gay has nothing to do with the sexuality of the airplane. It is the name of the pilot's mother. Her last name was Gay. But
yeah, it's so dumb.
It is dumb because, that one was kind of funny because it's this plane that nuked a city and killed hundreds of thousands of people. Oh, that's woke now. But also there were photos of the Tuskegee Airmen who were some of the first African-American fighter pilots to ever serve in the military. There were photos of the first women to graduate from the Marine officer school. Those were flagged for removal as well. It's not just silly oh, this is woke bullshit. It's an actual erasure of history of important things that are important to remember and to commemorate. And so, yeah, the airplane is gay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear it. Like, gallows humor, it's funny because it's so ludicrous, but obviously it's actually kind of fucked up. They're just deleting history. Chris, another side note on a story just to wrap up, and just kind of like putting the boot in on other podcasts. Gavin Newsom's podcast really fucking echoey, right? Just doesn't sound good.
So much
sounds
reverb.
better. Yeah.
So much reverb. I mean, I don't know if producer Simon's listened to it, but it really doesn't sound great. No soundproofing in that room, which is not good for podcasts.
I did listen to it. I listened to him. Yeah, shame on Gavin Newsom. Sorry if you're listening, Gavin. But yeah, I did listen to it, and basically, I'm just gonna say it was boring, and it was just I found it really just weaselly. Like he just speaking to Charlie Kirk and just going, "You've been so good at getting young men," and it's like, yeah, I guess if you try and turn a generation of young men right wing in bullshit ways, then you probably can manipulate young men. Like it's just, I don't understand what he's trying to do with the route at it. Also, then they were talking about university, and Gavin Newsom didn't really push back when Charlie Kirk said that everyone's just sitting around deciding what to be offended by today. And he also made a joke about suggesting people were studying North African lesbian poetry. And and Newsom's just like, is that a real course? And Charlie Kirk's like, I thought you would know. And they just get a real laugh out of that one. And then the Steve Bannon one, again, Steve Bannon says that Trump won in 2020, which he did not. Gavin Newsom kind of seems to struggle to tell him that directly, which just feels a little bit. So yeah, if anyone else got any podcasts they don't like, just send them over and we'll give them some shit. Right, let's do some listener questions now. This one, let's start with a weird one, see how we go. We might get more serious. Clara Godwin Sutty asks us, snog, marry, avoid Musk, Trump, and Vance. Chris, you first.
Probably avoid Vance because I think he's awful.
Yeah.
I would, well, I mean, effectively avoid all of them.
Okay.
But maybe marry Musk because he's rich.
They're all
No, but he doesn't pay child support.
I'm not having any kids with him. It's fine.
Not if he has his way. I'm sure he's got some scientists.
I suppose there I'm going to have to snog Trump, which seems terrible. I mean, no one's winning in that. So,
no.
Well, they are.
Oh yeah, they're all getting some Chrissy kissies.
Don't say that ever again. HR.
Chrissy kissies.
Oh no.
Do you even have an HR department?
Not really. Chris.
Do you mean Chris?
What are you final decisions?
I've just said that, haven't I? I can't remember what I said now.
Trump,
Did I said I'm going to have to snog Trump because I said that last. I said I'd marry Musk because he's rich and I could stay away from him, I think.
Okay.
And I'd have to avoid Vance because I find him intolerable.
Nikki, what about you?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Jake. My boyfriend listens to this pod. My fiance. But
okay.
Okay.
You
I think I would.
it.
No. I'm not gonna dodge it. I'm a brave woman.
Sorry, Jake.
I think I would marry Trump, but because I think I could strike a Melania deal. This is a man who very clearly he doesn't have like a sexual relationship with his wife. Melania gets money. She does her own thing. He allegedly sexually harasses young lawyers and other women who want to be in his orbit. Snog? Maybe JD Vance. I think I'd go with JD Vance. Just because, you know, he's got the eyeliner. I can imagine he's like a pretty lady.
Out of all of them, I think he's the one who gives the best kiss.
Yeah, probably. Yes. Elon, avoid like the fucking plague. That man to me just reeks like slimy. He's like
Nikki,
slimy.
we are on such a wavelength here. Exactly the same for the same reasonings. I'm kind of thinking, I just think JD Vance looks maybe like the most well kept of the trios. If I've got a snog of the physicality.
Teeth, like,
exactly. And
you do that before every podcast.
I do.
Weird.
Yeah. I like to feel fresh on audio, just so that you can all hear me being minty.
Minty. Yeah.
No, I also have to do it before like podcasts and interviews. I can't if my mouth feels weird. No.
What's wrong with you?
Exactly. We're on a wavelength.
I also
here.
put on perfume so you can smell me.
Why?
Exactly. Yeah, I just get clean
I
for
do.
it. So I just feel all like ready to go. I do that for you, listeners.
I'm always ready.
I'm smelling good and I'm minty. But yeah, I think you're right, Nikki, and that's what I would have gone for. Marry Trump, avoid Musk, because yeah. You know, I feel like if I was within a meter of him, you're getting pregnant. And then, and I don't want to deal with that shit with Musk, really. And then, yeah, Vance, just like, yeah, he looks like he could be clean. This question is going to go completely over Nikki's head. This one is from Liam on Spotify. Nikki, he doesn't say this, but I'm going to say, sorry if this makes little to no sense to you as an American. Liam asks, I'm a Celtic fan, upfront and honest. Do you miss Brendan Rodgers and Kasper Schmeichel? Have you ever heard of Neil Lennon or Muzzy? Is it? Chris?
Well, thanks for the question, Liam. That's a really good question that you've asked.
This is what we want.
This is the kind of content we want. Yes, I miss Kasper Schmeichel. No, I don't miss Brendan Rodgers. Have I heard of Neil Lennon? Yes, I have. And Muzzy Is It. And they're both great men.
Yeah, Muzzy Is It. That goal at Grimsby. Fair play. Where did we see Neil Lennon was managing?
Bucharest, was it? Something like that?
He went somewhere quite...
It was the Romanian Premier Division.
Yeah, but
Anyway.
but yeah, I miss Kasper Schmeichel. Getting rid of him that season was absolutely ludicrous from us. And I miss when it was good under Brendan, but then it went really bad, so I don't miss him and I dislike him. But I hope he's doing nicely for you and Celtic, I say. I don't really like talking about football because Leicester's so bad right now.
Yeah,
it was better under Brendan, so I do miss him, I guess. But I don't. Anyway, Zach Evans here asks a question. Is there a point where Trump's unique relationship with the press becomes a problem for him or the exec or the government at large? There must be a point where if you are ostensibly running an entire nation but only functionally communicating with a base in the low millions on Truth Social or the low dozens in Mar-a-Lago, does it start causing the autocrat to lose effective power? Nikki, you're the smart one. Off you go first on this.
I mean, I think it's been a problem for a while. I think for years now, the press has struggled to cover Trump. There's, this tension between the fact that he's built himself, and some media outlets like Fox News have readily become propaganda apparatuses for not just Trump, but like the Republican project as a whole. It's why we're seeing him try and make all these changes to how press covers him in the White House, to the press pool, the White House briefing room, the introduction of like less reputable outlets like Breitbart into these spaces that were typically reserved for like reputable news outlets that, did the work of fact checking and just had a long track record of upstanding reporting. We've seen him lean farther into that. And I think the thing that Trump does really well is he understands that I think most people these days don't necessarily get their news from sitting down on the couch at 9 p.m. every day and watching cable news for an hour. They're getting their news from social media. They're getting their news from podcasts. Subscribe to the Patreon. They're getting their news from the internet, from the people around them, from what they hear. And I think as president in his first term, in the in-between, and now, he did that really well. He knew that he didn't just need to build alliances with networks like Fox News. The Republicans understood with Trump that they needed to build a system of like digital influencers and podcasts and social media talking heads who all worked around a common goal. And I think that's why you see such a widespread schism in the way people relate to news, relate to Trump, because Democrats have not done that well. Democrats are still really stuck in like institutional news. There's not a lot of like leftist progressive podcasters and like news influencers on the left the way there are on the right in the United States. So I think Trump's relationship with the press, it's something that the news industry as a whole, I don't think has ever really figured out how to appropriately negotiate in a way that readers and viewers and listeners have confidence in. We've talked about it before. Chris has given us some great statistics on how much trust in the media has fallen over the past 8 years. And to the other part of that question, this idea that Trump is not necessarily crafting his messaging, his decisions, his policy to his base so much as like the close inner circle of rich people in Mar-a-Lago. I think it's true. I think that very much is the case. I think we've talked about it before, how Trump campaigns on a populist working class message. But as we're seeing in these first 6 weeks, he governs in a corporatist fashion. He governs in a fashion that, according to him, is great for corporations, is great for the wealthy, is very industry focused, not necessarily working class prosperity focused. And that's actually one of the point of tensions he's encountering right now, is that these tariffs, all this, all these hack and slash policies toward the federal government, well, they were presented to people as something that would help the working class and, make business boom in the United States and usher in a golden age of prosperity for working class Americans. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing working class people losing their jobs arbitrarily. We're seeing a lot of anxiety about the economy, not just from, everyday Americans, but also from companies, from investors, from corporations who are saying, hey, this isn't what was promised. And Trump is really struggling to negotiate that tension.
Final, I'm going to go for just so we can end on a funny note, and I've just thought of something that I want to ask you both, actually. Chris, what would you and Elon Musk be wearing at your wedding?
Oh.
What's the theme?
I'd be dressed as Darth Maul.
Okay.
Full face paint and everything.
Yeah.
I've stuck spikes onto my head that are actually just shortened ice cream cones.
Nice.
And I've painted them black.
Okay, good.
Oh, no, they're not black. They're orange, aren't they? His horns.
I don't know.
And Elon Musk is dressed as... He's dressed as... I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
I'm trying to think whether he's dressed menacingly or I've humiliated him and bullied him into wearing what I want. Okay. Otherwise, the wedding's off. So I therefore think that he's probably dressed as one of Wanda from Fairly Odd Parents.
Okay, nice. Good imagery there. Nikki, your marriage to Trump, what theme are we going for? Because you've got such an unlimited budget. What are you going to go for?
A theme?
Yeah, or like what are you wearing? Like what's it going to look like? The Trump.
I've changed my mind actually. I'm dressed as a Cybertruck.
Okay, nice. Just in a cardboard box.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. But legs are sticking out the bottom.
Yeah.
The theme is French Revolution. I am Robespierre.
Okay, nice. I think me and Trump is just a Vegas wedding. It's just last minute. Wedding. There's like Elvis impersonator there and stuff. Like, look, it's like if we'd just go funny with it. Anyway, those questions were all asked on our new Patreon community chat, which you will have access to if you sign up to our £5 and above tier, which also gets you bonus content. Right now, there is a bonus episode there of me and Chris talking about conspiracy theories, where we thought we were going to talk for about 10 minutes and we talked for about 40.
Yeah.
Which is delightful. Pals like that. We had a big old chat. So there's a link in the show notes. Or we are good friends, and he looked like we were going to hold hands there, but I'm just getting the teleprompter remote. There's a link in the show notes, or go to patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. That's patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. And that brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction. Nikki, thank you very much.
Thank you, my friends. It was
Chris,
lovely.
Thank you very much.
Jov, you are most welcome.
And Simon,
thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Just delightfully unhinged today, guys.
Yes. Yeah, we've gone weird with it. I quite like it. So, and if you like us being unhinged, remember that you can back us on Patreon. Search American Friction Podcast Patreon, or go to patreon.com/American Friction directly to sign up. There's a link in the show notes. We want to keep going. We really, 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 really do. But we need your backing to keep the show on the road. And a quick reminder, if you enjoy what we're doing, but you can't support us financially, we get that, but please do rate and review us wherever you're listening to the show. You've been listening to the ear-hugging podcast of the year, American Friction. Make sure you keep listening forever. Bye.